Recognize Congressman Curtis for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Ranking Member, for this hearing. Thank you for including my bipartisan bill. You all know in the West, we're blessed with amazing public lands and resources. However, excessive salt in our rivers can damage sites in Utah's iconic national parks, limit available drinking water in our rapidly growing state, and tarnish the water that ranchers use to feed the rest of the country. Ancient seas that once covered much of the Intermountain West left significant saline rock formations. When water contacts these formations, it dissolves and salt discharges them into the Colorado River and its tributaries, thereby elevating the river's salinity. This causes environmental damage and hundreds of millions of dollars in economic losses each year for water users. Congress recognized this problem several decades ago. In 1974, Congress created the Salinity Control Program to address it. For nearly 50 years, this program has successfully reduced the amount of salt in the Colorado River. We all know there's less water flow today, and budgetary issues require us now to make changes to this act. One particular example in Utah shows the importance of this program. The Washington County Water Conservation District in St. George, Utah, is partnering with Reclamation to evaluate how they can beneficially reduce salinity at the local hot springs, the Colorado River's second highest source of salinity. The spring produces approximately 5,000 gallons of water per minute, or more than 7 million gallons daily. The springs release an astonishing 109,000 tons. Think about that. That's 6,813 semi-truck loads of salt annually. The spring's high salinity limits use and poses unique challenges to regional and local water supply. Programs incorporated in the Salinity Control Act, combined with innovative water districts, have the potential to make hundreds of millions of gallons of water usable for activities in Utah and that we love and rely on for grazing and recreation. I'm grateful that we have Utah resident Don Barnett with us today, and I look forward to questions a little later in today's hearing, and you will be able to explain technically what most of us cannot. Chairman, I'd like to direct my questions to Mr. Barnett, and once again, thanks for traveling and being with us. I know firsthand that you've left a beautiful place to come out here to Washington, D.C., so thank you. So those of us that grow up in the West are used to stories about loss of life and violence associated with water disputes, and yet you come to us today with a suggestion that has 7 basin states in agreement. Can you explain how in these difficult water circumstances you've been able to actually get agreement, and why is it that 7 states all agree on this solution?
Absolutely. First of all, improved water quality is better for everybody. Whether you're in the top portion of the river or the lower portion of the river, improving water quality increases its utility, makes it so that it's better for human consumption, and that it's more productive in its uses. Also importantly is that it helps the states comply with Clean Water Act standards that were initiated 50 years ago under the Clean Water Act by EPA. And so it allows for compliance within the Colorado River Basin of those standards. And then lastly, I'd say that 50 years ago, the 7 Colorado River Basin states came together and said, this is a basin-wide issue. We're going to work together on a basin-wide basis, and we're going to cooperatively solve the water quality issue. And therefore, despite the fact that there's an awful lot of pressure and tension on the river itself, water quality itself has remained something that the states have worked unitedly on ever since it's passed. In my organization, we work together, and it's always a unanimous vote. And if we don't have a unanimous vote, then we go back and we rework it until all the states are together.
That's a pretty darn good model. Maybe we should study it here in Washington. Thank you to you and your colleagues for that work. Can you, so people can better understand the program, could you give us maybe a specific of a project that is indicative of the type of work they're doing?
Absolutely. Maybe I'd give you 2 quick ones. Sure. One is Bureau of Reclamation in Western Colorado has worked on what we call the Paradox Valley Unit, where we have about 150,000 tons of salt that flow into the Dolores River in one little reach of the river. Bureau of Reclamation picks up that salt and injects it deep into the earth so that it doesn't come into the Colorado River. On a more general basis, the bread and butter of the program is to work with irrigation agriculture and to go to them and work with them on improving water efficiency practices. And so the Bureau of Reclamation's basin-wide program, for example, in the Muddy Creek Irrigation Company that received a grant from the Bureau of Reclamation several years ago, they took that grant and they piped 37 miles of previously earthen ditches that was leaking into very salty soils and put it in a pipeline so that that leakage no longer continued. That one project alone saved 3,000 tons of salt from coming into the river. And equally importantly, then it opened up the area so that then NRCS could follow the Bureau of Reclamation and come and improve the on-farm water efficiencies. Through the EQIP program, they go to the irrigators and they say, would you cost share it with us in changing so that you don't irrigate like great granddad did and flood the daylights out of the ground and wash a bunch of salt into the river, but rather we'll put sprinklers on your property and therefore you only apply enough water to meet the crop's need and there's not extra water to dissolve salt and bring it into the river. And so another than 3,000 tons of salt were able to be saved on another 3,000 acres through that improvement. So that's just an
Yes, and if I understood that example correctly, also saving water.
Yes, water efficiency then reduces the amount of water they needed to divert to the fields.
Great. Your testimony did a great job, but would you just take a minute and articulate if Congress doesn't pass these changes, what happens to the Colorado River?
So in my mind, disaster, quite honestly. Bureau of Reclamation is required under law, as soon as there's money spent for salinity control, to cost share from the basin funds. If reclamation goes to the basin funds and because power revenues are down, there is no money there, then they're in a bind. They can't implement. And so it puts in jeopardy the entire program.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your testimony, for being here today, Mr. Chairman. I yield my time.